The royal palace of the Varnian Empire stood beneath two glowing suns. Its white towers touched the clouds, shining like blades of crystal against the sky. Inside, the grand hall shimmered with soft light. Golden curtains waved gently in the air, and the scent of rare alien flowers floated through the room. Every noble in attendance bowed deeply as Princess Lyraya entered. Her presence was like calm music. Her skin softly glowed with a pale blue light, her eyes deep like distant oceans. She was known throughout the galaxy for her wisdom, her beauty, and the unshakable calm in her voice. Yet today, something was different. As she walked across the polished floor, something faint brushed her senses. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but it caught her heart before her mind could name it. A scent. Not the perfume of the hall, not the sweetness of Varnian flowers, but something rough, warm, and strange. It carried dust, smoke, and metal. It carried memories. She froze mid-step. Her eyes lost their royal calmness. The courtiers looked up confused as their princess stood still, her gaze distant, her breath trembling. That scent, it couldn't be real. It belonged to a place she had never dared to return to. It belonged to a human. The image rose before her eyes as if time had folded back. Flames, sand, the wreckage of her escape pod burning in a lonely desert, her lungs filled with smoke, her strength fading. She had been the only survivor of the crash, surrounded by twisted metal and fire. Her guards were gone. Her empire couldn't reach her. She had been sure that was her end. Then he appeared. A man, scarred, dusty, and bleeding, stumbled out from the wasteland. His uniform was torn, his face burned by the twin suns, and his eyes were tired but fierce. He had no armor, no weapon strong enough to save even himself, yet he had come running toward her. She remembered the moment he lifted her from the sand. His arms trembled, his breathing was heavy, and yet he carried her as if she weighed nothing. "You're gonna be okay," he had whispered in a deep, hoarse voice. "Hold on, princess. I've got you." That scent, his scent, was carved into her memory. The smell of his skin, the faint mix of dust, smoke, and sweat. It was the smell of life, of earth, of something wild and honest. Lyraya's heart pounded. She could almost feel the heat of that day again, the rough texture of his hands as he shielded her from the burning debris. She remembered how he had torn his own uniform to bandage her wounds, how he had given her water when he had none left for himself, how his laugh had echoed across the empty desert even when he was too weak to stand. "Why?" she had asked him once, her voice barely a whisper as they hid in the wreckage. "Why help me? I'm not your kind." He had smiled at her then, tired but warm. "Because you needed help. That's reason enough." She never forgot those words. And now, years later, in the heart of her palace, surrounded by nobles and guards and honor, that same scent was here again. It cut through every perfume and every layer of ceremony. It reached her like a whisper from the past. Her fingers tightened around her robe. Her throat felt dry. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning every face. There were dozens of alien delegates, ambassadors, soldiers, servants, but among them, could it be him? No, it was impossible. Humans were not allowed here, not in the royal court. The Varnian Council saw them as dangerous, unpredictable, unrefined. To most of her kind, humans were a species that survived by luck, not by wisdom. They were brave, yes, but foolishly so. But she knew better. She had seen their courage in the eyes of one man who had carried her through fire. A man who had refused to abandon a stranger from another world. Her chest ached. She had thought he was gone. After the rescue ships came, after the medics carried her away, she never saw him again. She had searched, sent messages through every human channel, but no one had ever found him. They told her he had died in the desert. Yet the scent told her otherwise. Lyraya took a slow step forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke to her advisor. "Who is that human envoy standing near the banners?" The advisor blinked. "A human? Only one arrived this morning, Your Highness. A soldier named Ethan Hale, representative of Earth's outer command. He came to deliver a message of peace, Ethan." Her heart skipped a beat. The name hit her like lightning. She remembered it now. He had told her his name once before he passed out from exhaustion. She had whispered it as he lay unconscious beside the wreckage, promising she would never forget him. "Ethan," she whispered now, her voice breaking. The advisor looked puzzled. "Your Highness?" But she said nothing more. She turned away from the throne, her pulse racing, her thoughts spinning. Could it really be him? Could fate be that cruel or that kind? Her mind flooded with emotions, fear, hope, disbelief. Her throat tightened as she tried to breathe through the rush of memories. She remembered the way he had smiled even when everything around them was dying, the way he had whispered to her, "You're safe now, princess. You're safe." Her fingers brushed the pendant she still wore, a small piece of metal shaped like a human dog tag, the one she had found beside her after he vanished. The last piece of him she had left, and now, he was here. The great hall felt smaller. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. Her steps grew unsteady as she looked toward the edge of the room. There, among the shining Varnian guards and towering diplomats, stood a single human man in a simple black uniform. He wasn't grand or decorated. He wasn't trying to stand out. His face was older, scarred, worn from battles unseen, but she knew that face. She knew that scent, the scent of fire, the scent of earth, the scent of the one who had once carried her through hell. Lyraya's voice was only a whisper, meant for no one but herself. "It's him." And in that moment, for the first time in years, the calm and perfect princess of the Varnian Empire forgot her crown, her throne, and her people. She was no longer the heir of an empire. She was just a woman who had found the ghost she had been waiting for. The great hall buzzed with quiet whispers, but Ethan Hale heard none of them. He stood near the far wall, away from the golden lights, his posture straight but tired. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. The Varnian court was too perfect, too polished for a man who had spent his life fighting in the mud and dust. He kept his eyes down, pretending to study the data pad in his hand. The alien language meant nothing to him, but it gave him something to look at, something to do so he wouldn't have to face the endless stares. The nobles around him looked at him like a curiosity, some with fear, others with disgust. He was the only human in a hall filled with hundreds of shimmering beings who considered themselves the peak of civilization. He wasn't supposed to be here. Ethan had been sent as a peace envoy, a token gesture, from Earth to show cooperation with the Varnian Empire. It wasn't an honor. It was politics. He had been chosen not because of who he was, but because he was expendable. A retired soldier, a man who had seen too much and lost too many. A name buried in military records. He didn't care. He just wanted to get through this mission quietly, deliver his message, and leave. He had no dreams of diplomacy, no hunger for fame. The galaxy had already taken enough from him, and yet the moment he entered the hall, something strange happened. A scent, sweet but faint, floated through the air. It was unlike anything else in this place of cold metals and perfect order. It reminded him of flowers from a planet he once thought he'd never see again. It reminded him of her. He had told himself long ago that she was gone, that the blue-skinned princess he had carried through the desert had died or forgotten him. He had buried that memory deep, like a wound that could never heal. He had told himself it didn't matter. She was an alien princess. He was just a soldier. Their worlds had collided for a moment, then drifted apart forever. But now, standing in this glowing palace, surrounded by her people, that same warmth spread through his chest. The same strange feeling he had tried to forget began to rise again. He lifted his eyes, just for a second, and there she was. Princess Lyraya stood at the far end of the hall, dressed in silver silk that shimmered like moonlight. Her blue skin glowed softly, her long white hair braided with crystal threads. She looked older, wiser, stronger than before, but Ethan saw something else, something he remembered all too well. The same eyes, the same quiet fire. For a heartbeat, their gazes met across the room. The noise faded. The movement stopped. Time itself seemed to pause. Lyraya's eyes widened, and for a brief, fragile moment, Ethan saw pure recognition in her expression. Then she turned away, her hands trembling slightly. He didn't know if it was real or if his mind was playing tricks on him. Maybe she was just another alien princess who looked like her. Maybe the scent, the memory, the feeling, it was all a dream. He looked down again, trying to steady his breathing. His fingers tightened around the data pad. He had faced wars, gunfire, death, but this, seeing her again, was something he didn't know how to fight. He remembered the desert, the sandstorms, the burning wreck of her ship. He remembered how he had carried her on his back while the sun tore at his skin. He remembered the weight of her against him, the strange peace he had felt even as everything around them burned. He had saved her because he couldn't watch someone die when he could do something about it. It didn't matter that she wasn't human. It didn't matter that she was royalty from a race that barely tolerated humanity. In that moment, she had been just another soul in pain. He hadn't done it for glory. He hadn't done it for a reward. He had done it because it was right. And when the rescue ships came, he had slipped away before they could find him. He didn't want medals or stories told about him. He didn't want to stand beside her in front of her people as some strange hero. He just wanted her to live. That was enough. Now, seeing her again standing tall and proud, he felt both joy and ache. He wanted to be glad that she had survived, that she had found her place again. But part of him wished she hadn't seen him, wished she would never remember the broken man who dragged her through hell. The advisor's voice cut through his thoughts. "Human representative, please step forward." Ethan blinked, straightened, and walked toward the throne. Every step echoed too loudly. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes following him. His boots sounded harsh against the crystal floor. When he finally stopped before the princess, he bowed low, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. "Your Highness," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but his heart wasn't. Lyraya looked down at him. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her face calm, but her eyes were soft, filled with something no one else seemed to notice. Recognition. She spoke with royal grace. "Welcome, representative of Earth. It has been a long time since our worlds last met in peace." Her voice trembled on the last word. Ethan nodded slightly. "I'm honored to be here, Your Highness." He wanted to say more, to ask her if she remembered, to tell her that he never forgot. But this was not the time. Not here, not in front of everyone. Lyraya hesitated for a second. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter. "Have we met before, human?" Ethan froze. His throat felt dry. He didn't dare look up. "No, Your Highness," he said after a long pause. "Not that I remember, a lie. But a necessary one." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, and he could feel her studying his face, his voice, his very presence. Then she nodded slowly. "I see." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Words were spoken, oaths exchanged, hands shaken. But both of them were somewhere else, trapped between the past and the present, between duty and memory. When the meeting ended, the courtiers bowed and began to leave. Ethan stood still for a moment, watching as Lyraya rose from her throne. Their eyes met one last time before she turned and walked toward the private corridors. For a second, he thought he saw something like a smile on her lips, small, sad, and full of meaning. Then she was gone. Ethan exhaled slowly. His chest ached with emotions he couldn't name. He had thought he'd buried his past, but it had found him again in the most impossible place. As he turned to leave the hall, he whispered softly to himself, "I'm glad you made it, Princess." He didn't know that she had stopped in the corridor outside, her hand pressed against her heart, whispering the same thing. "I'm glad you're still alive, Ethan." The palace was quiet that evening. The suns had set, and the glass corridors shimmered with soft blue light from the moons outside. The air was calm, but Princess Lyraya's heart was not. She had spent the entire day pretending to be composed, speaking to nobles and council members as if nothing had shaken her. But inside, her thoughts kept circling one thing: him, that human, the envoy from Earth, the man who had bowed before her today, the one whose voice, scent, and presence had cut through the years in silence. She didn't need proof anymore, she knew. Her heart had known the moment she saw his eyes. Lyraya stood alone on her balcony, staring at the twin moons rising over the city. The wind brushed through her white hair, carrying the scent of the gardens below. Sweet, calm, alien. Yet all she could remember was the scent of smoke and dust from that day years ago. Her voice was a whisper to the wind. "It's him. I'm sure of it." She remembered the way he had looked at her then, in the desert when she was half-conscious, terrified, and lost. There had been no fear in his eyes, no hatred, no disgust, only care. Only stubborn human determination. And now that same look had flickered for just 1 second in the grand hall today. He had tried to hide it, but she had seen. He had recognized her too. Lyraya turned sharply and walked toward her chamber door. She couldn't wait. She couldn't stay in silence any longer. There were 1,000 questions burning inside her. Why was he here? Why had he left her without a word? Did he hate her for forgetting him? For letting him disappear from her life? Her guards bowed as she passed, but she ignored them. Her steps were soft but quick, her robe trailing behind her like liquid silver. She moved through the long corridors until she reached the lower section of the palace, the guest quarters where the human envoy was staying. 2 guards stood outside his door. They saluted when they saw her, their faces uncertain. "Your Highness, is something wrong?" "No," she said softly. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. It was against every rule to leave a royal alone with a foreign soldier. But the tone in her voice was not one they could argue with. Slowly, they stepped aside and left the hall. Lyraya took a breath and touched the panel beside the door. It slid open with a low hum. Ethan Hale looked up in surprise. He had been sitting on the floor beside his bunk, polishing a small metal bracelet, an old soldier's charm from Earth. He stood quickly, his posture stiff. "Your Highness," he said, startled. "Forgive me, I didn't expect—" She stepped inside before he could finish. The door closed behind her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with memories neither could escape. Lyraya was the first to break the silence. Her voice was calm but trembling. "Why did you lie to me today?" Ethan's hand froze over the bracelet. He looked away. "I don't know what you mean." Her eyes softened, full of sadness. "Don't do that. You know exactly what I mean." He sighed and sat down slowly on the edge of the bunk. "Because it didn't matter anymore," he said quietly. "It was a long time ago." "It mattered to me," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan looked up. Her blue eyes were glistening in the dim light. She looked so different now, stronger, wiser, but at that moment she looked like the girl he had carried through fire, fragile and scared. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "For years I thought you were gone." "I almost was," he said with a weak smile. "The medics found me days later. They didn't even know I was the one who helped you. They just patched me up and shipped me off." "Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you come back?" He hesitated. "Would they have let me? Your people wanted nothing to do with humans. I didn't want to cause trouble for you. I wasn't a hero, Lyraya. I was just a soldier who got lucky." Her lips trembled slightly. "You call that luck? You were dying when you carried me. You gave me your last drop of water. You almost burned alive trying to pull me from the wreckage. You call that luck?" He looked down, ashamed. "It doesn't matter. You survived. That's what counts." Lyraya stepped closer, her voice growing softer. "I searched for you," she said. "I searched every planet, every record. I even went to Earth once during a trade mission. I thought maybe I would find a name, a clue, something. But there was nothing." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't known that. You went to Earth?" "Yes," she said. "Because I needed to thank you. Because you were the first human I ever met, and you changed everything I believed about your kind." He smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything, Princess." Her expression hardened. "Don't call me that," she said quietly. He blinked, confused. "What?" She took another step forward. "Don't call me Princess like I'm some stranger. You didn't call me that in the desert. You called me by my name." His breath caught. "Lyraya." The sound of her name in his voice broke something inside her. It was soft, real, and human, so different from how the nobles said it. She closed her eyes, letting the word linger in the air like music she had missed for years. When she opened them again, there were tears on her cheeks. "I thought I'd never hear you say that again," she whispered. Ethan stood slowly, his chest tight with emotion. He wanted to say something, to reach out, to touch her hand, but the distance between their worlds was still there. He forced a smile. "I didn't expect to see you again either. You've done well for yourself. You're not the scared girl I remember. And you," she said softly, "are not the soldier I remember. You're thinner, tired, sad." He laughed quietly. War tends to do that. For a moment they both smiled. It was small but real. The years and pain between them didn't vanish, but the silence no longer felt so heavy. Then Lyraya said what she had been holding back since the moment she saw him. "Why did you save me that day, Ethan? You didn't even know me." He looked at her for a long time before answering. His voice was steady, but there was something deep in it, something raw. "Because no one else would have. And because I couldn't stand to see someone die when I could help. Doesn't matter what species, what planet, what rank. You needed saving. That's all that mattered." Her eyes shone brighter than the stars. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the reflection of himself in her silver eyes. "Then let me do the same for you," she said quietly. Let me save you now from the loneliness you carry." Ethan looked at her speechless. The pain of years of silence, the distance between two worlds all fell away for that one moment. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to stay. But deep inside he feared what it would cost her, so he only whispered, "You already did." And for the first time in years the princess smiled, not as a ruler, not as an alien, but as the woman who once found hope in the arms of a human. The next morning came heavy and cold. The palace corridors, usually bright with light and song, were strangely silent. Rumors had already begun to spread, rumors that the alien princess had met the human envoy in secret. The news moved through the royal halls like wildfire. Every servant whispered, every noble frowned, and every council member waited for confirmation. Princess Lyraea, unaware of how fast gossip traveled, sat alone in her private chamber. She hadn't slept. Her mind replayed her meeting with Ethan again and again. The sound of his voice, the warmth in his eyes, the way he had said her name like it still meant something. For the first time in years she had felt human emotion. Hope, joy, longing, all at once. But she knew what her people would think. The Varnian Empire had never forgiven humanity for its roughness. To them, humans were wild creatures. Too emotional, too chaotic, too unpredictable to trust. They admired humanity's courage but feared its passion. A Varnian's heart was supposed to be calm, like still water. But Lyraea's heart was not calm anymore. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. "Enter," she said softly. The door opened and her advisor, High Minister Viran, stepped in. He was tall, his silver skin gleaming like polished stone. His expression was sharp and his eyes carried quiet anger. "Your Highness," he said stiffly. "There are concerns." Lyraea knew what was coming. She folded her hands, keeping her face calm. "Speak." "The council has learned that you dismissed your guards last night," he said. "That you met privately with the human envoy. Alone." She didn't answer. Varen's voice grew colder. "Do you understand how dangerous that is? The humans may seek influence through you. They may try to control the throne. Our people already distrust them. This will only confirm their fears." Her gaze lifted slowly to meet his. "The human you speak of is not what you think he is. Not what we think." Varen's voice sharpened. "He is a soldier, a creature of war, the same race that caused the Orion conflict, that destroyed 3 colonies in their endless battles for territory. They are reckless, unrefined." Lyraea's patience thinned. "And yet one of them saved my life when your soldiers left me to die." The minister's eyes widened slightly. "What are you saying?" She stood, her robe flowing like liquid silver around her. "I owe my life to that man. Ethan Hale. When my ship fell, when I lay trapped in fire and wreckage, it was not a Varnian who came for me, it was him. A human. He carried me for days through the burning sands. He gave me his water, his blood, his strength." The minister's face turned pale. "You speak as though he is more than a soldier." Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "He is more than that. He is proof that courage is not born of species, but of heart." "Be careful, Your Highness," Varen warned. "Words like that can destroy your throne." Lyraea looked away, her gaze falling on the twin moons through the window. "Then let them," she whispered. The advisor stared at her, speechless, before bowing stiffly and leaving. As the door closed, she let out a long breath. The weight of her crown suddenly felt heavier than ever. Ethan, meanwhile, stood outside on one of the palace terraces, staring at the sunrise. The alien sky was painted with pink and gold, but his thoughts were dark. He knew the whispers. He could feel the cold looks every time a servant passed. The Varnians didn't hide their dislike for him anymore. He had been through wars before, but this was different. This was a battle of silence, of stares, of words never spoken, and he was losing. He knew Lyraea would face the worst of it. He hated himself for that. He hadn't meant to cause her trouble. He had only come here as a messenger of peace, not to reopen old wounds. When the princess appeared on the terrace, he almost didn't turn. But her soft voice reached him. "You shouldn't be out here alone," she said. "They're watching you." He smiled faintly without looking back. "Let them." "I've been watched worse." She came to stand beside him. The wind caught her hair, making it glow in the morning light. "The council is angry," she said quietly. "They think I've disgraced the Empire by meeting you." He finally turned to face her. "Then maybe I should leave before it gets worse." Her heart sank. "Leave?" He nodded. Your people don't trust mine. I can't blame them. I've seen what humans can do when they're desperate. I don't want to bring more problems to your world." She took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "You can't go." "Not yet," he frowned. "Why?" "Because—" She hesitated, her eyes filling with quiet pain. "Because I don't want to lose you again." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. The words caught in his throat. He wasn't used to this kind of emotion, this honesty that burned hotter than any battlefield. "Loraya," he said softly, "you're a princess. Your world depends on you. You can't let an old soldier like me ruin that." "You're not ruining anything," she whispered. "You saved me once. Maybe you're meant to save something bigger now." He looked away, clenching his fists. "And what if I can't? What if all I do is make things worse?" She stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "Then at least we'll know we tried. Isn't that what humans do? You fight even when you know the odds." Her words struck him deep. He looked at her, really looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the strength in her voice. She wasn't the fragile girl from the desert anymore. She was a ruler, standing against her own world for what she believed in. He sighed. "You're going to get yourself into trouble for me." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll finally be doing something worth it." For a long moment they stood together in silence, the suns rising higher above the city. The light caught on her hair and his worn uniform, blending gold and silver together, two worlds standing side by side, even as everything tried to pull them apart. That afternoon, the Varnian Council met. The chamber was vast, with floating platforms and glowing pillars of crystal. Loraya stood before them, proud and calm, while the elders argued among themselves. One shouted, "This human must leave immediately." Another hissed, "He is dangerous. His kind always brings war." But Loraya raised her hand and the hall fell silent. "Enough," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried power. "You call him dangerous. Yet it was your fleets that started the Orion conflict. It was your pride that cost us thousands of lives. Tell me, who is more dangerous, the human who saves or the rulers who destroy?" The council fell into stunned silence. No one dared answer. She took a step forward. "I will not banish Ethan Hale, not when he came here in peace. Not when he represents the part of humanity that gives me hope." The elders looked at her with shock, disbelief, even anger, but none could speak. She bowed her head slightly. "If that means losing my throne, then so be it." Her words echoed through the chamber like thunder, and though the council did not respond that day, one truth had already been born among them. The princess of the Varnian Empire had chosen to stand beside a human, and somewhere, deep inside the walls of the shining palace, history began to change. The air in the Varnian capital changed. It was subtle at first, the way soldiers walked faster through the streets, the way people spoke in hushed tones. But soon the tension became impossible to ignore. Ships were gathering in orbit. Military convoys began to move. The peace talks that had once given hope were now hanging by a single fragile thread. Ethan could feel it in his bones. He had seen this pattern before in a dozen war zones, when words stopped working and everyone started preparing for what came next. He watched from the palace balcony as alien ships painted the skies with glowing trails. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Loraya joined him quietly, her robe flowing like silver mist in the morning wind. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired. "They're preparing for war," Ethan said, not looking at her. She nodded slowly. "Yes, the outer houses are calling for retaliation. They say humanity has insulted us by sending a soldier instead of a diplomat." Ethan turned to her. "They wanted a diplomat, not someone who's seen war." "They fear what they don't understand," she replied softly. "And they do not understand you." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Most people don't." Loraya looked out toward the horizon where the twin suns were rising. "My people believe in strength without emotion. But I've seen where that leads. Cold decisions, lifeless peace. You taught me that compassion can be stronger than command." He studied her face, the way she held her chin high even as fear flickered in her eyes. "Loraya," he said quietly, "if war breaks out, they'll use me as an excuse." "You'll lose everything," she shook her head. "No. I will lose everything if I let them forget what mercy means." Later that day, the council summoned Ethan. The chamber was crowded, filled with alien nobility, soldiers, and ambassadors. The air shimmered with tension. When he entered, dozens of glowing eyes turned toward him. He stood tall, his boots echoing on the polished floor. He didn't wear armor or a weapon, just his old worn uniform. The same one he had worn the day he saved the princess years ago. High Minister Veyron stood before him, his tone sharp as a blade. Human Ethan Hale, you stand accused of interfering with Varnian affairs. You have spoken to our princess in secret and influenced her decisions against council will. Ethan looked him in the eye. I didn't influence anyone. I spoke the truth. The truth? Veyron sneered. Your truth is irrelevant to this empire. You are an outsider, a relic from a violent race. Ethan didn't flinch. Maybe, but I've seen violence. I've seen what happens when pride matters more than lives. Gasps filled the room. Lyria rose from her seat, unable to stay silent. Enough, she said firmly. You will not insult the man who saved my life. Your Highness, Veyron said coldly. With respect, your emotions cloud your judgment. Perhaps, she said, stepping forward. But at least I still have emotions. A murmur swept through the chamber. Ethan saw something shift in her, a courage that had grown brighter with every challenge. That night, everything changed. An explosion shook the palace. The sky outside turned red with fire. Sirens wailed, echoing through the halls. Guards ran past Ethan, shouting in their alien tongue. He grabbed one by the shoulder. What's happening? Attack! The soldier yelled. A human fleet has entered orbit. Ethan froze. That's impossible. Humanity doesn't... Before he could finish, another blast hit and the walls trembled. He didn't think, he ran. He knew where Lyria would be. He found her in the royal courtyard, surrounded by guards trying to move her to safety. The night sky burned above them, streaked with falling debris. She turned as he ran to her, relief flooding her face. Ethan, she cried, I'm here, he shouted, grabbing her arm. We have to move. No, she said, pulling away. We can't run. We need to stop this. My people will think this is your doing. They'll destroy your fleet. They'll destroy everything if we don't end it, he said. She looked up at the flaming sky, pain twisting her expression. My world. Your world. They're both breaking apart again. Ethan cupped her face in his hands. Then we fix it, her eyes widened. How? He looked toward the command tower rising in the distance. By showing them the truth. The two of them raced through the palace halls past flames and falling debris. Soldiers shouted, alarms screamed, but they didn't stop. Ethan's heart pounded as he guided her through smoke and chaos. When they reached the command center, they found it in chaos. Officers yelling, screens flashing with battle reports. Cease fire! Lyria shouted, her voice echoing across the chamber. The officers turned, startled. One of them stammered, Your Highness, the human fleet is firing on our outposts. That's not possible, Ethan barked. Humanity didn't authorize any fleet movement. But as he looked at the holo display, his stomach twisted. The attacking ships bore human markings, an older model from the frontier colonies. Rogue forces not under Earth's control. He clenched his fists. They're mercenaries. Not Federation. Someone hired them to start this war. Lyria's eyes darkened. Veyron. Ethan's head snapped toward her. The minister? She nodded. He controls the border houses. If war begins, he gains power. Rage filled Ethan's chest. Then we end this now. Lyria turned to the command officers. Open a communication line to both fleets now. They hesitated. Your Highness, that's not protocol. Do it. She shouted. The room obeyed. A moment later, the screen split into two. One side showing the human admiral, the other showing the Varnian battle commander. Lyria stepped forward, her voice clear and commanding. Stop this madness. You are being used. The humans attacking are not of the Federation. They are hired traitors. The human admiral frowned. And why should we believe that, Princess? Ethan stepped into view. Because I'm Ethan Hale, Federation veteran, and I swear on every life I've saved that this isn't us. The admiral's eyes widened. Hale? You were declared missing years ago. Found by her, Ethan said, nodding at Lyria. We've both lost enough to lies like these. Don't add to it. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then the admiral turned to his officers. Hold fire. The Varnian commander hesitated too, eyes flicking toward Lyria. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. Standing down, the room exhaled as one. The explosions outside began to fade. Lyria looked at Ethan, her eyes glimmering. You did it, he shook his head. We did. But before they could speak again, the doors burst open. Minister Varen stood there, his face twisted with fury. "You fools!" he shouted. "You've doomed us all!" Ethan's hand went to his weapon instinctively, but Lariah stepped forward. "No, Varen. You doomed yourself." The guard seized him. The truth of his betrayal spread quickly, and the chamber that once echoed with war now trembled with relief. Ethan turned to Lariah, exhaustion in his eyes. "You just stopped a war, Princess," she smiled softly. "No, we just reminded the universe what trust looks like." And outside, for the first time in years, the sky was quiet again. The war that almost began ended in silence. The skies cleared, the fire faded, and what remained were two broken empires staring at each other across the stars. The world had not ended, but it had changed. Princess Lariah stood on the highest terrace of her palace, watching the sunrise paint the sky gold. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of rain from the east. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Her hands rested on the marble railing, and she closed her eyes. She could still hear the echoes, the cries of the people, the thunder of ships, the words of the man who had once carried her across a desert to save her life. Ethan. He was alive. Against every law of fate and time, he had come back into her life, not as a ghost from her past, but as a reminder of everything good she had ever believed in. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. She already knew who it was. "You should be resting," Ethan said quietly. Lariah smiled faintly. "So should you." He came to stand beside her. The sunlight caught on his scarred face, tracing the years of hardship that had shaped him. "You handled that council better than any general I've seen." She looked at him with soft eyes. "You've seen too many generals," he chuckled. "That's true." For a while they just stood there, the wind moving gently between them. The silence was comfortable. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded words, it was full of understanding. Finally, Lariah spoke. "They'll rebuild now. The council will claim victory, of course. They'll say they saved the empire. And you'll let them?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "Let them take the credit. The people need heroes, even if they're the wrong ones." He studied her face. There was sadness there, but also strength. "You've changed," he said quietly. "So have you," she replied. He laughed softly. "I don't think I ever stopped changing. War does that. It takes something from you every time." She looked at him then, truly looked at him. The man who had defied two worlds just by standing beside her. His eyes carried sorrow, but behind that sorrow was a kind of peace. "And what did it take from you?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Too much," he said. "But meeting you again, maybe it gave a little of it back." Her heart ached at those words. She wanted to say something, but the emotion caught in her throat. So instead, she reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, rough from years of struggle. He didn't pull away. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking. The world outside might still be mending, but for this moment they had found stillness. Days passed, and slowly, the palace came back to life. The wounded were healed, the ships repaired, and the people began to believe again. Lariah threw herself into the work, meeting refugees, rebuilding homes, and holding councils with neighboring systems. Ethan helped too, though not in the way others expected. He worked with soldiers, teaching them about human battle ethics, about restraint, honor, and mercy. The Varnians listened at first with suspicion, but soon they began to respect him. Word spread across the city about the human who stopped a war, the soldier who stood beside their princess. But with fame came distance. The more Lariah was called before the council, the less she saw him. She told herself it was for the best. Their paths were never meant to cross again, not like this. One night, however, she found him in the old courtyard where the first fires had fallen. He was sitting on a broken marble bench, staring at the stars. She approached quietly. "You're leaving, aren't you?" He didn't turn, but she could hear the sadness in his voice. "The Federation sent for me. They want a full report. I'll be heading back in the morning." Her heart dropped. "So soon?" He nodded. "There's always another war to stop, another fire to put out." She came closer, her voice trembling. "And what about this world? What about me?" He turned to face her, and for a moment his eyes softened. "You don't need me, Lariah. You've become stronger than anyone I've ever met." She shook her head, tears glimmering in her eyes. "That's not true. You made me stronger. You reminded me how to care again. Without you, I would have become like them. Cold. Empty. He reached out, brushing his thumb against her cheek to wipe away a tear. You were never empty. You just needed to remember who you were. Then stay, she whispered. Stay and remind me every day. He froze. The stars shimmered above them, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. He wanted to say yes, to stay, to build something new with her. But he couldn't. The universe was too big, too broken, and he was still a soldier, Liraya, he said softly. If I stay, I'll only bring danger. There are people out there who won't forgive what we did here. They'll come for me, and maybe for you. I don't care, she said, her voice breaking. He smiled sadly. But I do. The silence between them felt heavier than any explosion. Finally, she whispered, when I thought you died in that desert, a part of me died too. Don't make me lose you again. He took her hands gently. You won't. As long as I breathe, you'll never be lost. Her tears fell freely now, but she didn't hide them. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. You once told me your people believe in eternal memory, he said softly. Then remember this. For all the stars in all the skies, you're the one I'll carry. And with that, he kissed her, not out of passion, but of promise. A kiss that said goodbye without saying the word. When he pulled back, her eyes were closed, and a single tear rolled down her silver skin. The next morning, the human ship rose into the alien sky. Liraya stood on the palace balcony, watching as the engines glowed and the craft disappeared into the horizon. Her heart ached, but she did not weep, because she knew that somewhere among the endless stars, Ethan was still looking toward the same sunrise. That day, she gave an order that surprised the entire empire. She had a statue built, not of herself, not of a Varnian hero, but of a human, a man carrying an alien princess across a burning desert. When the people asked her why, she simply said, because he reminded me that even across galaxies, a single act of kindness can change the fate of worlds. And as the sun set behind the golden towers, she whispered to the wind, her voice soft and steady, until we meet again. Ethan Hale. Years passed. The war that almost began became a lesson in peace. Both humans and Varnians rebuilt side by side, learning to trust again. The name Ethan Hale became a story told in every academy, and Princess Liraya became the queen who changed the stars. But peace never lasted long in the galaxy. Ethan had returned to the Federation, where medals and speeches meant little to him. He had seen too much, lost too much. The days after he left Liraya's world were long and empty. He went on missions, saved lives, ended battles, but no matter where he went, he carried her in his heart. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing in that courtyard, her silver hair glowing in the firelight, whispering his name. He never stopped hearing it. One evening, years later, the Federation received a distress signal from deep space. A refugee vessel carrying diplomats had been caught in a collapsing nebula. No rescue ships were close enough, except his. Without hesitation, Ethan volunteered. He boarded the shuttle, his hair now streaked with gray, his uniform worn but still proud. He didn't think about danger anymore. He only thought about saving whoever needed him. That was what he did best. The storm around the nebula was brutal. Lightning tore through the void and the ship shook violently. Ethan gripped the controls, forcing the engines to hold steady. His co-pilot shouted, "Sir, the readings are unstable. The radiation levels are off the charts." "Doesn't matter," Ethan replied. "Lock onto the distress beacon." When the signal came through, his heart skipped. The code was Varnian, royal encryption level. He froze. "Run that again." "It's confirmed," the co-pilot said. "The beacon belongs to the Varnian flagship Orion. The ship's registry matches the Queen's transport." Ethan's breath caught. Liraya, he didn't think, he acted. "Get us in there now." The small rescue craft broke through the storm. Debris floated everywhere, burning metal, shattered ships, and faint cries over the radio. Then he saw it. The massive Varnian ship, broken and drifting, its shields flickering like dying stars. "Hold position," Ethan ordered. "I'm going in." His co-pilot's eyes widened. "Sir, that's suicide." He smiled faintly. "You don't know me very well." Grabbing his old helmet, Ethan jumped into the escape pod and launched toward the burning ship. The impact nearly broke his ribs, but he didn't stop. He forced the hatch open and crawled into the smoke-filled corridor. "Liraya," he shouted, his voice echoing through the wreckage. "Liraya, where are you?" For a moment, only silence answered him. Then faintly he heard a voice, weak but familiar. Ethan? His heart almost stopped. He followed the sound, stumbling over debris, until he reached the shattered command deck. There, trapped beneath a fallen beam, was the Varnian queen, her silver gown torn, her face pale but her eyes still shining. When she saw him, she froze. Her breathing quickened. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. It can't be. It can't be you. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, trying to lift the beam. It's me. I'm here. She stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. You haven't aged a day, she whispered. He laughed softly. You're lying. I've aged too much. Together they managed to move the beam, and he lifted her into his arms just like he had years ago in the desert. She was lighter now, fragile, but the warmth of her touch felt the same. You never change, she murmured. You always find me when I'm lost. He smiled through his tears. And you always get yourself in trouble. She laughed weakly, the sound breaking his heart. I miss that voice. He carried her through the burning halls, his strength fueled by something deeper than duty. When they reached the docking bay, his ship was waiting. He placed her gently inside, sealing the doors as explosions thundered behind them. As the rescue ship pulled away, the Orion exploded in a wave of golden light. Ethan watched silently, his hand still wrapped around hers. Hours later, they were safe aboard the Federation station. Medical officers rushed to help, but Lyraya refused to let go of his hand. I thought you were gone, she whispered. All these years I dreamed that maybe I'd see you again. But dreams fade, he smiled softly. Maybe some don't. She studied his face. The scars, the tired eyes. Yet behind all that, she saw the same man who had once shared his last drop of water with her in a desert far away. How did you find me? She asked quietly. He shrugged. Guess I followed the same scent of trouble I always do. She laughed, her voice weak but full of warmth. You never change, Ethan Hale. He looked down at her hand in his, her silver skin glowing faintly under the station lights. You know, he said softly, there wasn't a single day I didn't think of you. Her eyes glistened. And there wasn't a night I didn't look at the stars, wondering if you were looking too. For a long time they just sat there, fingers intertwined, no words needed. The galaxy around them continued to turn, uncaring, but for them time had stopped. In the days that followed, the Federation and Varnian empires renewed their alliance. News of the rescue spread fast, how a human soldier had once again saved the alien queen. But for Ethan and Lyraya, the universe outside didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the promise they had made years ago, to never forget. One evening they stood together at the observation deck, watching the stars drift by. Ethan spoke quietly. Remember when I said I couldn't stay? She nodded. Yes, he smiled faintly. Maybe it's time I stopped running. She turned to him, tears glimmering in her eyes. You mean? He nodded. If you'll have me, I'll stay. No wars. No missions, just... For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she reached up and touched his face gently. I have waited half my life to hear those words. He took her hand and placed it over his heart. Then hear them again. I'm home, Lyraya. She smiled, the kind of smile that lit up the entire room. Welcome home, Ethan Hale. Years later, when both empires told stories of peace and unity, they spoke of a legend, a human soldier and an alien queen whose love bridged galaxies. They said that when the queen walked through her gardens, she would sometimes stop and look toward the stars, whispering softly to the wind. And they said that somewhere beyond those same stars, a man with scarred hands and a gentle heart would look back, smiling, for the scent of her world, the echo of her voice, and the warmth of her soul were forever bound to his. And as long as there were stars to shine, their story would never fade, because sometimes love doesn't need to conquer worlds. Sometimes it just needs to find its way back again.